Good morning. Welcome everyone to the Frederick County Law Enforcement Center. My name is Jack Markey. I'm the Director of Emergency Management for Frederick County, and I'd like to welcome you here to an important date for us in the emergency communications community in Frederick County. 50 years ago today, our Board of County Commissioners made a decision that we're going to talk about a little bit today, talk about how that ties into the rich history of Frederick County, as well as the bright future that we see for serving our citizens and providing quality service, equitable service for everyone, regardless of what challenges they may face. So with that, I'd like to welcome our distinguished elected representatives who are here with us today, starting with our County Executive, Jan Gardner, is with us. Representative of, as I go down my list here, Juliana Albowitz, who's assistant to U.S. Senator Barbara Mikulski, is with us. And I'll try to do this in order. Karen McManus from Chris Van Hollen's office. Thank you for attending. Council President Bud Otis. Thank you, sir. Council Vice President MC Keegan Ayer in the back. Councilman Tony Chmelik. Thank you, sir. Councilman Jerry Donald. Councilwoman Jessica Fitzwater. There she is. Also along with us is former Mayor Carol Jones of the City of Brunswick. Thank you, sir. As well as our Chief Administrative Officer Doug Brown for Frederick County. In the public safety list, without whom emergency communications doesn't have anybody to call to come assist Frederick County, Brunswick Police Chief Milt Fretch is in the back. DFRS, Division of Fire and Rescue Services, Chief Tom Owens is here. Along with Deputy Chiefs Tom Coe and Steve Leatherman. We are happy to have, along with us, the Dean of Students for the Maryland School for the Deaf, Lori Bonheyo. Welcome. And scanning the audience to see if there's anyone I've left out that I recognize. We'll move into the meat of our event here, which is the recognition of the 50th anniversary of centralized emergency communications in Frederick County. Some confuse that with 911. 911 took a little longer to come to us than 50 years ago today, but we're here to talk about the history that brought us that ability, that 911 capability. 50 years ago, the Board of County Commissioners authorized the creation of a fire board and of a organization that came to be known as Central Alarm. And I am honored to be here, and I'm especially honored to be here with all of the directors who have held the position of director or chief dispatcher of emergency communications for Frederick County. Without them, many lives throughout the decades would have had a different outcome. Because of their service, because of their leadership, we stand here with one of the best 911 centers in the nation. And I say that not just because I live here, not just because I work here and have the privilege of leading the team of employees that I lead, but because we are visited literally from around the world to see how we do business, to see how we serve our citizens, how we take people's darkest moments, brightest moments, and get them the assistance that they call us for. We do that in partnership with our public safety partners. It's not a one-person operation. It's not just the director. It's everybody that answers a phone, provides the training, provides our technology, and partners with us. So with that, I'd like to introduce the former directors of emergency communications. Mr. Jim Ridgely was our original chief dispatcher. Mr. Donald Trimmer, Mr. Randy Washi, Mr. Chip Jewell. I'm not sure if Mr. William Adams made it yet, but he was our acting director for a period of time. And then you will hear from our current director, John Wolfel, shortly. With that, I'd like to call to the podium, have the distinct pleasure of having worked for the county executive for several years when she was a county commissioner. Very proud of the investments she's helped us make that have led us to our current state of emergency communications in Frederick County. With that, Ms. Jan Gardner, our county executive.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you all for being here for today's celebration, and I certainly join Director Markey in welcoming all of you and welcoming our elected officials, our special guests, our past directors, and all the employees who have worked here past and present. I'm very excited that we've come together to celebrate the 50th anniversary of centralized emergency communication services in Frederick County. This occasion provides a great opportunity to look back at Frederick County's rich history of moving forward with centralized emergency communications and to celebrate our bright future as our county takes emergency communication capabilities into the future, utilizing new technology and really becoming a trend center, not only in Maryland, but in our region and also throughout the nation. 50 years is a long time, even though, as some of you might acknowledge, it does seem to fly by pretty quickly. But think of what's changed since June 15th, 1965. Back in the 60s, there were no cell phones. Most of us can't imagine that today. There was no computerization. We didn't have computers. And we had no central emergency communication system and no 911 call center. So what happened prior to central alarm? Citizens would have to call their local individual fire companies when they had an emergency. And this could be problematic for a number of reasons, including that during off hours, these phone numbers were sometimes answered in somebody's home. It might be the home of the local fire chief, or maybe even at a local business, which could be a gas station, a funeral home, a grocery store. So it's my understanding that the late County Commissioner Lou Dorsey, who was a volunteer firefighter himself, was the real push behind moving the county commissioners towards approving a central alarm system. At first, many were hesitant to join, fearing that they'd lose some control over emergency calls. And as you can imagine, bringing everybody into the fire and emergency services business together was complicated. We know sometimes today it's still complicated. But over time, people realized it was the right thing to do so that we would have efficient, effective services for the citizens. The original central alarm was located in the former Frederick Emergency Hospital, or Montague Infirmary. For the first 5 years, there was only one dispatcher on duty. And rumor has it, because there was only one person on duty, they even had a phone in the bathroom because they didn't want to miss a call. Obviously, the call volume then was not like what it is today. In fact, Chip tells me that on June 1st, 1967, Central Alarm dispatched only one call for the entire county. And it wasn't until August of 1982 when we had 911 capability. Now, if you fast forward 50 years, today's Emergency Communications Center answers over 107,000 911 calls, with an average of 293 calls a day and an average of 50 calls per call taker per shift, which I think is a lot. Callers within Frederick County service boundary talk to a single person, a single call taker, and they're not transferred between agencies. Last year alone, call takers handled over 382,000 phone calls because they received many calls that are other than a 911 emergency call. Most importantly, our call center has kept pace with changing times. Today, about 82% of all 911 calls are received from a cell phone, from a mobile phone. We are the only 911 center in the whole Baltimore, Washington, Northern Virginia metropolitan region capable of processing text to 911 messages. and that service is available on all 4 major commercial carriers. We are one of less than 5% of 911 call centers in the country that provide this service. And it's a huge benefit to our citizens, especially those who are deaf and hard of hearing. And of course, Frederick County is really leading the way in this. Now, I do want to say we do want people to call 911 and not depend on text 911, because it is important for our call takers to hear everything that's happening when a call comes in. But it is a great service for people in our community who are deaf. It's also a great service for people who may be in a situation where they can't make a phone call. In addition, Frederick County's emergency communication administers a radio system for over 10,000 radios, which provides support to Frederick County multiple agencies. Public safety agencies located in 8 counties in 4 states, as well as the state of Maryland and federal agencies. And last year, they processed over 6 million messages. The complexity of calls and the delivery of coordinated services has also changed dramatically over the past 50 years and will continue to change as we move into the future. We certainly know that changes in technology are going to continue to happen faster and faster, and we're going to have to try to keep up with it. We also know that there's a direct correlation between calls for service and population growth, and that we must plan accordingly as the county continues to grow. Already in this year's budget, we're hiring more call takers. We're initiating 2 overlapping shifts during peak 911 activity hours to reduce overtime and, of course, to make sure we respond to all the calls. But one thing is clear: saving lives and protecting property is the primary fundamental responsibility of our public safety agencies. Frederick County will continue to strive to be on the cutting edge to assure our citizens' safety and well-being. We've come a long way from 1 call per day in 1965 to the bustling facility we have here today. It took the vision and forethought of many people over that 50 years. Many in the audience today who followed the Commissioner's decision to centralize emergency communications are to be congratulated. I also want to make sure that I recognize and thank all of our county employees, past and present, who have served as call takers. They really are on the front line serving the citizens when they have a need. And so it's a very stressful job, and they do a great job listening, responding, and providing direction and assuring people that help is on the way. We're indeed proud of emergency communications. We're proud of our rich history and our bright future. I want to congratulate John Wolfel, Jack Markey, all the emergency communication employees, and all of our partner agencies on this 50th anniversary. And I do have a certificate of recognition on behalf of the county. I know others do too, so I'm not going to read it, but I will present it to you. On behalf of the citizens of Frederick County, I want to commend the Division of Emergency Management and Emergency Communications for your contributions to our community and for continually working to improve the lives of the people who live here. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'll introduce our next speaker, who is our representative from our United States Senator Barbara Mikulski, Juliana Albowitz.
Good morning. It's my pleasure and honor to represent U.S. Senator Barbara Mikulski today. As many of you know, when 9/11 happened, it kind of opened the eyes of everybody, not only in the United States, but in the whole world, and particularly Congress and Senator Mikulski. Senator Mikulski and Steny Hoyer went to bat and started the fund for the FEMA grants, seeing the necessity for firefighters to be equipped with what they need to fight the fires. So with that, I would like to say that the senator asked me to be here today and honor your 50th anniversary. Following Jan, I can honestly say I can't say any more than she has already said. Thank you to all the people in here who make Frederick County a safer place to live, work, and to visit. So with that, I do have a senatorial certificate to present, and this is presented to the Frederick County Department of Emergency Communications on the occasion of your 50th anniversary. 50 years of establishment of centralized emergency communication services for the citizens of Frederick County, Maryland. Congratulations, signed Barbara A. Mikulski, United States Senator, on this, the 15th of July, 2015. Be safe.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Your next speaker is Council President Bud Otis and my friend and former colleague. Thank you.
I'm pleased that the 5 new members of the County Council are here today with me. They've been introduced, but I want to mention again, Vice President M.C. Keegan-Air represents the city in District 3. Jerry Donald represents District 1, and Tony Schmelik, District 2, is the treasurer as well. And then Jessica Fitzwater, District 4. Appreciate them very much. It's a great team, and we have a lot of fun working together. I have a certificate on behalf of the council, Frederick County Council, that I will present to you. Certificate of appreciation for the 50th anniversary of centralized emergency communication services in Frederick County. On behalf of the council.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I'd like to take just a brief moment to give you a personal experience. I've never used 911, but I called home and my wife didn't answer the phone, and I was a little concerned, and so I decided to go home. And just before I left, she called and said, I need you. So I got home as quickly as I could, and she was already had gone into shock. I knew it was beyond my capacity to handle the issue, so I picked up a phone and called 911. And Dorothy Picking answered the phone. And I want you to tell Dorothy that I was here today and how much I appreciate what she did. She told me to take my wife, who was sitting at the sink in our bathroom, to lay her on the floor. And so I laid on the floor with her, and I put the phone between us. And she said, "Don't hang up." She said, "I will stay with you till emergency personnel arrive." And she told me what to do to help my wife through this incident. And it was a emotional experience for us. I've never used 911. And I want to tell you, we have a great service in this county. And I want to commend all of you for the hard work you do. And I want you to know you are appreciated. And my wife is here today, and you can tell it worked. When the 3 young men from the Middletown Fire Station came in for EMS, they immediately went to work, and they helped Rose. By the time she got to the hospital, things were going in the right direction. So we have great service. I love you guys and gals for all you do, and if there's anything we can do from the council, please let us know, because we saw it firsthand. Thank you.
I'm going to take a moment of Division Director prerogative here to make a few comments before bringing Director Wolfel up. A theme that you've heard reflected in the different comments goes back to the founding of Central Alarm, and that's the concept that someone's always going to be there to answer your call. And we feel very strongly about that. When we hire new employees, we ask them to do 4 fairly simple things, but they have to do a lot of them. They have to do them with people that are under stress, people who may have language barriers, speech barriers, hearing barriers. And our goal is to provide excellent service to every one of them. We ask our employees to make connections to the right public safety agency, to the right agency, even if it isn't public safety. A large number of our calls are non-emergency. The most important ones are emergency, but we provide an essential non-emergency service to connect people with information, with agencies, with 211 and other community services that can help them find the help within the community to provide them the help that they need. We ask our people to solve problems, not create problems. There are enough problems in the world. We want to be the place that helps connect people to problem solvers, and solve those problems for them. To do that, however, means we have a lot of partners. The screen represents what our emergency communications center looks like today. We are not just a county operation. We are the Frederick County Emergency Communications Center and have partners from our friends at the Maryland State Police. Sergeant Lance is here representing the barrack commander. We have Frederick Police Department represented in our dispatch center. Thank you, Mr. White, for attending. We have the Maryland State Highway Administration Coordinated Highway Action Response Team, otherwise known as CHART, that helps us keep the roadways clear and keep our responders safe, as well as Frederick County Sheriff's Office and Fire and Rescue. We did not start that way. Central Alarm started as a far simpler operation for the county fire service. But over the years, thanks to the leadership that John will talk a little bit about, we've evolved based on the needs of the community, based on the best way to do business, based on feedback from our partners. Gentlemen I wouldn't be here without, recognize in the back of the room, Mr. Steve Haller, headed the Technical Services Division of Frederick Police Department for a number of years. Without his partnership, we would not have the close relationship with Frederick Police Department that we do today. I am proud to say that there is not a public safety agency in Frederick County that can't take a radio in their possession and turn it and talk to all of the other public safety agencies in Frederick County. And that happens because people are mission focused, they're focused on getting an outcome for the citizen, and they're focused on the safety of our public safety providers. We've seen the tragedies worldwide. We've seen the tragedies in other parts of our nation. And our mission is to make sure that if we are ever unfortunate enough to have those experiences here, that there's not an excuse where we couldn't talk to them. There was nobody to call. They couldn't take a text to 911. I don't ever want to be in that position. So we lean forward hard to bring the best of the technology, the best of the training, the best people to bear on the problem. And one of those I have the pleasure of introducing. John Wolf was our Director of Emergency Communications. He holds the distinction of being a gentleman that has worked literally every position within the Emergency Communications Center, working his way up from a dispatcher all the way up to the director's chair. So with that, I'd like to invite him up and give him the opportunity to give some reflections on the folks that brought him into the service and who we inherited this quality emergency communication system from. John?
Good morning, everyone. I'm in awe to be standing here before 4 of the 5 directors that came before me. They've done a lot of work, and without them, and without their vision and knowledge of the communications and their dedication to the citizens of Frederick County, we would not be where we are today. The first is Jim Ridgely. He was the original chief dispatcher some 30 years ago, 28 years ago. He wants me to keep going. He was responsible for setting up the first centralized emergency communications, and I just can't fathom what he went through. I read through some of the documents he produced back then, and his forevision for what was good, what was to come, and how to handle things was outstanding. We definitely would not be where we are today without Jim. The one thing he set up was a 7-digit number that was number for people to call for emergencies in the county. The city wasn't part of that just yet, but when Jim came on board, he set up a 7-digit number for the county. Then we have Donald Tremor, our second chief dispatcher. He oversaw the inclusion of the city fire companies into the county system, so the county and city only had one number to call for their emergencies. He oversaw the installation of the TTY service for the hearing impaired, which was the first in the state, and we have some rumor that it was actually the first in the nation. That's some forethought to think about the hearing impaired some 35 to 40 years ago. He also oversaw the move to the Montague Lane site, which was our communications center for some 15 to 20 years. He oversaw the installation of 911 Phase 0, which was in 1982, where we received 911 calls without the phone number or the address being present. He was responsible for the purchase and install of our first computer-aided dispatch system. The county executive talked when we first started, it was all by paper, and Don helped us transition to the computerized dispatch. He brought on the Frederick County Sheriff's Office and Animal Control into the communications center. He upgraded the radio system from 1 channel to 4 channels for fire. And you can imagine how many we have now, Jack. What is it, some 30-some? 130? He brought the ambulance to hospital communications radio into the communications center, which the ambulance uses to consult doctors at the hospital. And the most important thing he brought, in my opinion, was he hired me some 30 years ago as a part-time dispatcher, so I really appreciate it. Then our third is Randy Washi. He oversaw the upgrades of the 911 Phase 1 and Phase 2, which gave us the ability to get the person's phone number and address they're calling from. He also oversaw the move from Montague Lane site to our current location here in the Law Enforcement Center. He was responsible for the installation of our current computer-aided dispatch system and also for the move from our low-band radio system to our current 800 system. He instituted the call-taking quality assurance program, which we still carry on today, and people throughout the nation and the country come to visit and see how we administer that. And he also brought Thurmont PD, Brunswick PD, and Maryland State Police into the dispatch center. Willie Adams. He was an acting director for a very short time, our 4th director. But in that short time, he mandated the use of all 3 nationally recognized call-taking protocols for fire, ambulance, and police. He also redesigned the backup center and the law enforcement center upstairs, which you guys will be able to tour later, to accommodate additional staffing. And then we come to Chip Jewell, the director right before me, number 5. He oversaw the 800 radio system move from analog to digital, which is our current system now, the addition of assistant director, the telestaff scheduling software, which we use now to schedule people for 24 hours and 365 days a year. He also is responsible for the early alert warning sirens that are in many of the county communities, which we can activate from the communications center. He set up our first weather monitoring system. He also brought State Highway and Frederick City Police into the dispatch center. And then he also oversaw the upgrade for our 911 system to an IP-based 911 phone system. The one common theme that runs through all the directors before me was we want to provide the best service to the citizens of Frederick County that we can, and the inclusion of all public safety in communications. So when someone calls 911 or they call one of our non-emergency numbers, it's a one-stop shop. When you call, we will get you help one way or the other. And without the forethought of these previous directors, we would not be where we are today and have that. And Jack is correct. We get visited from all around the world and want to know, how do we do it? Other jurisdictions in the state have even tried it and failed. So we're very lucky that the partners that we have with us, the Maryland State Police and the City Police and CHART and everyone else, that we all work for that common goal, to give the citizen what they need in Frederick County. If you look back at Central Alarm when they first started, they had 1 person per shift, 4 people on staff, 1 was the chief dispatcher, and they answered maybe a handful of calls a day. Today we have 4 shifts with 11 people. They're answering about 107,000 911 calls a year, which translates to about 284 a day. On top of the 911 calls, they're answering around 380,000 business lines calls per year, which translates to about 1,013 calls a day. On top of the 911, on top of the calls, they're also dispatching 220,000 dispatches per year for Brunswick PD, Thurmont PD, Frederick County Sheriff's Office, Animal Control, Parks and Rec, Fire and Rescue, and handle most of the county's after-hours notifications for their departments. And the very end, the big number is we monitor over 3.5 million radio transmissions per year. Text to 911, the reason most of us are here today, besides the 50th anniversary. 2 years ago, we started the Text to 911 pilot program for the state of Maryland, which was for Verizon customers only. It allowed the caller to simply text on their phone to 911 operators in the communications center. Today, I'm excited to announce that we've recently upgraded our capabilities to handle all 4 major cell carriers: T-Mobile, Sprint, AT&T, and Verizon. Text to 911 makes it possible for the hearing impaired, the speech impaired, or a person who's in a situation that would put them in danger if they used their voice or talked, allow them to communicate with one of our communicators in the 911 center without any additional hardware or software on the phone. With MSD in our jurisdiction, this should be a great addition to the services we provide to hearing impaired in Frederick County. I want to make it clear that it's very important to remember that we will respond to any 911 call we receive, whether we have a voice, text, or no sound at all, based on a location we receive from the phone. If necessary, we'll have the phone carrier ping the phone for its location. We've had several calls over the last several years where staying on an open 911 with no voice has led to the apprehension and conviction of persons committing crimes or saved someone's life. One big example of this was several years back. One of our operators had an open 911 line. For the longest time, they didn't hear anything. Sometime into the call, they heard what they thought was an argument in the background. They started the sheriff's department to the location that we were shown for the phone. Sometime later, they heard what they thought were gunshots in the background. I've listened to that recording many times, and it didn't sound like gunshots to me, but our operator was keen enough to pick out what she thought were gunshots. She guided the deputies into the area of the location of the phone. As the deputies arrived, she thought she heard what sounded like a door alarm on a car door opening. She relayed that to the deputies who were standing in the middle of the street trying to locate the phone. They turned around, and there was a male standing in his driveway with his car door open and an alarm sounding. Turns out the man had just shot and killed his girlfriend, and the recordings of the shots and the open door alarm were used by the FBI and the sheriff's office to convict the man of murder. So you can see how important it is, how important every 911 call in the center is. And sometimes it's daunting that how many 911 open lines we get and how many times we have to send the sheriff's office, state police, city police, and their municipal police departments to those calls. And it's very important that our operators don't become callous to that we always send help. So know, as a citizen of Frederick County, if you call 911, we're going to do everything in our power to get you help. And in addition of the text to 911, it's just the logical next step for Frederick County as we move forward to the next generation of 911. So thank you for being here and being part of this important moment in Frederick County history. Jack?
Nobody says it like someone who has lived it over the years. So with that, I need to bring to the podium someone without whom I likewise would not be here, both for his time in emergency communications and his time in the county's fire service. I'd like to introduce Mr. Jim Ridgely, Chief Dispatcher, Chief Ridgely. Invite him to the podium to give us a few comments about the transition to centralized emergency communications and what life was like before we had everything that we have today.
Thank you, Jack. I am not known to be one person without words. Gets to me this morning. The story you told about the open 911 line, fantastic. Not that the line was open, but that one of your dispatchers had the knowledge, the training, and the leadership, I'm not letting you out of that, to handle that call, and proper attention was done, police activity, whatever was required. There's one thing I need to do first of all before I forget it. There was a comment made half an hour ago about the rumors of a telephone in the bathroom of the first dispatch center. That's not a rumor. That's true. And I really get a kick out of Chip sitting back here and Donnie Trimmer sitting there agreeing, yeah. Because they and I also worked some overnight shifts when you were the only one in the world, you thought. But the telephone incoming call had to be answered. That was probably the very most important issue. Perhaps it still is. Because once it's answered, then you have something that you can start dealing with. Working by yourself, nature really doesn't pay a lot of attention to your circumstances sometimes. and it was necessary to be able to answer an incoming call irregardless of where duty called you to be at that moment. I'm being so polite with my words. It's true. And I have often had to explain to a variety of people why I spent county money to put a telephone in the bathroom. I have to do one other thing before I forget. You of the hearing difficult community, paying very close attention to the interpreter. You cannot hear my voice, and I know that. I did not realize my voice was going to be so pretty. Thank you. I don't often have an interpreter when I speak to groups, and I don't speak to many groups anymore. I'm too old and experienced. I do not use the old word very often. But I just like to do that just to see the red face sometimes. No red face here. She is great. When I started Central Alarm, I set up the running area for the companies, the county companies. The city fire companies had well-established route areas. They're what we call it first due area. The county companies did not. They get a telephone call, chief's home, barbershop a couple of times, funeral home some places. If somebody called and said, I have a fire, I have a need, it was attended to, irregardless if that company was closest or not. What was delivered to me is to set up a running map, I'm going to use that term, that the closest fire company is identified for dispatch, because we had dispatch service as well. We didn't have to call the local fire chief to get them on the street. I guess some of the biggest, I was going to use the word fight, but that's a terrible word to use, discussions. It turned out to be fights. Verbal, thank goodness. Was setting up between Company A and Company B. Here is the halfway mark, and I traveled a whole lot of miles in this county, counting road miles. Get back to the individual fire chief of the volunteer fire companies involved. Chief, here's the dividing line on the map. I know, Jim, we can't do that. Farmer Jones over here gives us X thousands of dollars every year. He expects my fire engine to come no matter what the call is. But this other company's closer. I don't care if it's closer or not. That was the discussions, and I'm using that word very well, to get it established. That was probably the hardest thing I had to do in setting up Central Alarm, is to get those route areas, those dividing lines between companies. I was mandated by the Central Alarm Board of the county government to set this up. I had great cooperation from everybody, even though we had some disagreements from here and there. If you'd ever get a chance to look at the original or the very early running route map, there were a couple of little areas that were special box alarms. Chip, Donnie, perhaps you two remember those specifically. That's because of this problem that the fire chiefs could not agree. Okay? There's one way to do it. We'll send you both. We didn't have that many calls back then. But I am just indebted to all the people who helped me. I get the credit or the blame, whichever is appropriate. Mostly blame, I think. But we got it going. One number anywhere in Frederick County to call for an emergency. Specifically, fire is what we dealt with, but whatever call come in, we handled. The city of Frederick was not a part of the system at that time, but we would often get calls for the city. People didn't know if they were in the city or the county. We determined that when they told us where the location was. John, you mentioned something about addresses and something with computer-aided dispatch CAD and entering house numbers and so forth. When I started Central Alarm, except for Frederick City and maybe one or two of the larger municipalities, there were no house numbers. Hi, I'm John Jones. Chief so-and-so knows where I live. I have a fire. Okay. That gave us some challenges, and some of these older gentlemen, I didn't want to use that word, previous dispatchers would know what I'm talking about. You're talking to me. I don't know you from Adam. I don't know your location, but you have a fire. You have an emergency. Stop and think a couple of times. Bud related an emergency he had with his family. That's a very stressful situation. Do you agree, Bud? Could you tell me, without your house address, to quickly get to your location? Yes, but it's difficult. That's some of the challenges that we had. Thank goodness 911 Center doesn't have that same challenge. Now, there are times when people call and don't know where they are. I know that. I had visions of this very building. Well, maybe not quite. When I set Central Alarm up, computer wasn't even a word yet. Cell phones. I go like this because I have mine on my belt. Didn't exist. Mobile telephones were about this square and this big, and then the automobile with special power supplies and all that stuff. So it was a different time, a different world. I commend everybody, and especially you people today, for what you're doing. The numbers astound me. I don't remember them. They're about that big. But that's all I can say. I was lucky enough to have a little bit of background before, and I'm so glad someone mentioned Mr. Dorsey's name. He was the key to Central Alarm, of getting it pushed through the County Fire Association and getting it accepted and funded through the county government. He hired me, which makes me also very grateful. And I knew Mr. Dorsey personally. That isn't why he hired me, but we did well. John, Jack, is there anything else I can help you with? I don't know where to go because I wasn't prepared, obviously.
That's quite all right, sir. It's just thank you.
Thank you.
for your service.
Thank you, everybody.
I called a little audible with our agenda to keep with our theme of rich history and our bright future, and I think Mr. Ridgely certainly brought some light to the rich history that we have in emergency communications. I'd next like to invite to speak a representative of a very important community. I started my service in the fire service on the south end of Frederick. Maryland School for the Deaf has a special place in my heart. My family has a long history dating back to the founding of the Maryland School for the Deaf, being involved in that. So it's my pleasure to invite to the podium Ms. Lori Bonheo, the Dean of Students for the Maryland School for the Deaf, for a few comments on what the transition to text to 911 will mean for their community.
I'm going to make sure that everybody can hear the interpreter in the back, correct? We're good? We're good? All right. Making sure everybody can hear. We'll make sure you can hear me. All right. It's funny that you explained about history. And back in my time, I lived in New York. And I remember emergencies. They didn't have any cell phones in my house. I had none. I was deaf. So there was no phones. And when I had an emergency, I had to go next door and actually knock on the door. And if they weren't home, I would have to go to the next house and ask them to help me by calling the police on their phone. Can you imagine that idea a long time ago? Wow. That's what I had to do. So Same as when you commented about TTY. TTY, well, we didn't have that either. And we don't use TTY anymore. You don't have to bring it with us. We have relay services as well. Does everybody know what relay services is? Has anyone heard of it? Yes? It was a blessing, definitely, having relay services. And I use that all the time. TTY is too old now. That's part of the past. So thank you again. Before I begin, I wanted to share with you a personal story. Ironically funny. When they asked me to present about Text 911, I had no experience, but thank God I later did. I had a friend or a coworker, or several coworkers. We were together, and we actually had to use it at one point. Ironically, last week, I went biking with a group of individuals in Catonsville. We all biked together, and one of my friends lost control of her bike and hit her head on a large metal pole and fell over. And not only hurt her shoulder, but she also hurt her head. So that was the opportunity to use 911 text. Why not? At first, I started to dial relay. And I thought, no, we need something that's quick. So we use 911 text. I switched over from relay to 911 text. And from there, I clicked on 911 text, and it said, unfortunately, 911 is not available. And I thought, that's strange. And then I realized I was in Catonsville, not Frederick. So I'm looking at the message, and thank God another person was able to call 911, and that worked out, and that helped the situation. So again, that makes me appreciate the fact that Frederick is even more accessible. Again, I also wanted to mention about relay and identifying addresses where police can come to my home in Frederick. And Text 911 definitely helps because they're able to answer faster. I told my friend about the injury and what happened, and they explained, oh, no, you'll be okay. And then with the phone number, my son, in another area, Text 911, they don't have that there. So I called my son up there and explained, thank God we had Text 911 here in Frederick. They had nothing at home. So my husband said, oh, don't worry about it. We'll be all right. We have this. And the communication that was constantly going around, it's faster to be able to get help, especially from Frederick County Police. So I want to thank all of you so much. And I feel blessed to actually live in Frederick County for this reason. And I know that the deaf community in Frederick definitely feels and appreciated by you all as well. To summarize everything else, again, I want to thank all of you for providing the deaf community accessibility. Because of you all, we have accessibility. And without you, we'd never have Text 911 and be able to use our phones. We couldn't just pick up our cell phones and dial what we needed. And Text 911 has provided that accessibility here in Frederick. In any type of emergency. So thank you again very much for all your efforts and help. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very important to us in the Communications Center. It makes you feel good and makes you know that you're going in the right direction. That ends our ceremony today. We're going to have some tours of the 911 Center. Anyone that's interested, and show you the text to 911, how it operates. We'll probably break into smaller groups because the room's not that big up there. So enjoy some of the refreshments, and we'll break into smaller groups and go up for tours and see the text to 911 actually in operation. Thank everyone again for attending this important moment. Thank you.